Today we are reviewing first impressions, but definitely comparing the Bravia 7 on the top left-hand side, Sony Bravia 7, to the TCL QM8 below, which I think is one of the most amazing mini LED TVs in 2024. You guys saw my review. It's pretty awesome. And the top right-hand corner is the Bravia 9, and below the Bravia 9 is the Sony 3110. So let's say hello to everyone who's here. Thank you everyone for watching. And many of you are coming for the first time to check out this live stream. So, hey, welcome, Marcel. And if you guys have any questions, ask. But since I am going solo today, you might have to ask it multiple times in case I missed your question. Otherwise, we want to explore first, how close is the Bravia 7 to the Bravia 9 in performance? Are you missing anything by saving a little bit of money? And we're talking quite a bit, right? Currently, the Bravia 9 65-inch is almost $3,000, a few $100 under $3,000 by Black Friday, I'd say. The B7 is still $1,400 or so at 65-inch. And the QM8, though, solidly $1,000 or less by Black Friday. And so the differences between the QM8 and the B7, what are you getting with that premium, and what is the Sony tax about in terms of image quality, right? And then between the B7 and the B9, what are the differences there? Now, I've only had the Bravia 7 for a few days now. I fine-tuned it. Firmware is all updated to the latest firmware, the good one. I know there was a firmware nightmare back in September, but it sounds like it's good now. So both the 7 and the 9 have the most stable firmware, and you guys will check that out. I'm going to do a quick firmware update, or rather firmware check, so you guys know what it is. It's on the record in this video. And the QM8 literally just updated its firmware yesterday, or the day before yesterday. So it's the latest October 2024 firmware for the QM8. Now, what it does for these TVs, we'll see. So let's say hello to everyone real quick. And hey, good afternoon, Mozart's Ghost. Welcome, welcome. And this will serve as a really good first impression. So a big hello to everyone who's here today. Boom. So let's do a real quick firmware check so you guys have an idea. And we're going to do a settings comparison as well. So let's go through the settings of the TCL QM8 and you guys will see what I'm talking about. So here we are, the picture setting, and you guys will be quite surprised. It's in movie mode, and wait a minute, you're like, wait, why is brightness only at 60? You guys will see in a second. Part of the issue is this thing is so bright, my friends, so bright, that even at 60, it's a bit brighter than reference. So this is why I have the Sony 3110. The 3110 tells you how bright these TVs should be, right? It's all in HDR. And there's so much headroom on the QM8. It doesn't mean that the Bravia 7 and the Bravia 9 are dim per se. They're just trying to be accurate to 3110. And so this is, you know what? Let me do this. Let me go over the settings of the Sony first so you see where we're at. Now the 3110, actually, you know what? This is an unfair demo because it's 5,000 nits. Let me take it down a notch to something that's a bit easier. The C4, this one is a bit tamer, right? So this is more 2,000 nits. They can handle this, right? Okay, here we are. Okay, so now this is about quote-unquote 2,000 nit content. Let me look at the reference monitor where everything should be. The brightest part of this scene is about 1,000 nits, just above 600, 700. So yeah, these TVs could easily handle it. And you can see, relatively speaking, where they are. And even here, you see that the QM8 at the brightness of 60 that we had kind of matches the reference of everyone else. But let's do this real quick so you guys can see the settings. Picture setting on the Sonys, both of them professional mode. Now a reminder, on the Sony, only the Bravia 9 is calibrated. The Bravia 7 is not. Oh, and of course, I have to thank Sony. Big thank you, Sony, for sending me the Bravia 7. They felt so proud that the Bravia 7 comes so close, if not matching the Bravia 9. They want me to hold on to it long term and test it as if it was Bravia 9. So I'm going to hold on to this as long as I need to. Thank you, Sony, again, for sending me the Bravia 7, because to be honest, when I was at the Sony's launch event back in March, April, in Culver City, I was not impressed by the Bravia 7. I said to myself, This Bravia 9 looks awesome. I have no interest in reviewing the Bravia 7. I told Sony, like, I don't know, guys. It's an obvious step back, but that was 4 firmwares ago. With the most recent firmware update, I'll tell you right now, everything has changed. So let's check the settings real quick to make sure it's an even playing field for all these TVs. So they're both in professional mode. Making sure you guys can see that. Okay, you can. And brightness is max 90. This is the default actually out of the box on the Bravia 7. While the Bravia 9 is calibrated, the biggest change is auto local dimming I set to medium because I also feel that on the 7 it gives it the best image quality. Peak luminance is on high, which I normally set to in HDR. Color, both of them are in Expert 1, although Expert 1 on the 9 again is calibrated. And of course my 3110 below represents reference that is also calibrated. And clarity, I make sure all of that's shut off, right? So we don't have any artifacts. So there we go. Okay, and motion's to taste. So, and you can't even tell what motion is on YouTube. Now, oh, real quick, yeah, I forgot. The firmware currently we are on. Where are we on? So on the Sony TVs, you got to go to Help, and on the bottom left-hand corner, you will see its version ending in 140.1 NAA on both TVs. So they are most recent on the most recent firmware, which is what it is right now. Okay, on the TCL, so now we get to finally the settings TCL. So as you can see, at 60, the brightness is fine. When I had it at 100, I'm like, holy cow, this is way too bright. And it's definitely above reference. So if you guys want to see what it's supposed to be, it really should be around 60. And panel lotteries being what it is, but I have it at 60 for this particular model. It's not calibrated, so if you guys feel your TV might be too bright on the QM8, bring it down to 60, and it looks like it matches the reference and the TVs above. And even at 60, you guys will see it's still pretty bright sometimes. Now, whether it's over brightened or not, that's what we have the reference monitor for. So my brightness settings are contrast 100. Now, you can play with this to taste, but I think it's fine at 100. Dynamic contrast, got to leave that off. It messes up the color. Black stretch, I have no idea what that does. Still don't know. Dynamic tone mapping, I leave it off because there's so much headroom. I don't think you need it, but we'll play with it in some scenes to see if it helps improve things. Local contrast has to stay on high. If you shut it off, not only does it go dimmer, but you're going to have a lot of lifted blacks, especially black bars. You will see black bars, and I'll show you what it looks like when I have it off. So high is the way to go, although it does lift the brightness a bit too much in some scenes, which you'll see. It's not terrible, but you know, that's what it is. And the gamma is 2.6 because we are in a dark room and I want to match them as closely as possible. Okay, those are the settings. Let's see what questions we have. And Chris, let's take your comment here. Brightness is always supposed to be max for HDR. Correct. And on the TCL, on max, it's just completely inaccurate. So I want to make sure that we see what it's like in its most accurate brightness. They should have capped that brightness and recalibrated it. 60 should be the max, and then leave all that headroom for vivid mode or standard mode, but they didn't, right? They put all that headroom into movie mode, which screws up the consumer because you're like, wait, shouldn't I always be at 100? Because on both the Sonys, it's at 100%. So you're absolutely right. TCL needs to reset what their 100 is in filmmaker mode. And yeah, well, you know, so this is why we have the settings we have. But you're right, Chris. You know, this is something that we'll talk to TCL about later. How does local dimming set to medium affect blacks and black bars? So AJ, the black levels on the Sonys, high lowers the black levels a touch, but it dims the specular highlights way too much. And that touch of black level improvement was not worth it for me. It also, I felt, may have crushed the blacks just a touch. I'm losing some shadow detail. In medium, the black levels are not raised noticeably, but I'm getting that specular highlight back. And the shadow details are preserved to match the OLEDs, right? OLED TVs, and of course the reference. So it is definitely a great compromise. Normally I do not put it on medium. But on the B7 and the Mi 9, the medium is the best. It gives you the best combination of black levels and specular highlight. If you go to high, you're going to lose that specular highlight and make it look more like a, I hate to say it, Samsung QM90D, QM95D. They do a great job hitting the black levels hard, but they dim it way too much in terms of specular highlight. But at medium, you get more specular highlights. Now, not as much as on the QM8, which you'll see, but in return, the QM8 has a little bit of blooming and lifted shadows by hitting that specular highlight hard. And we'll see the comparison shortly. So, any other questions? And this is a great comment right here, James, before we jump in. QM8 looks good considering the 3110 and the B7 and the B9 look very close. Yes, and as a reminder, only the B9 and the 3110 are calibrated. All right, let's jump into this. Boom. So, we're going to go through these various scenes. Now, this one is just to give you an idea of what the white point relative to each other is. It's very close. I am so impressed by how all the TVs in their movie mode or filmmaker mode look so good. Obviously, you could fine tune it further, but the fact that the Bravia 7, let me stop right, oh, not yet. I'll stop on the next one. The fact that Bravia 7 looks so close to Bravia 9 out of the box, or the 7 is not calibrated and the 9 is, let's stop this one right there. Okay, so I'm going to lower the exposure a little bit on this. There we go. So all these TVs look great. it's hard to complain about them. And what is the brightness level of these TVs? Checking the reference monitor, we're at about 1,000 nits peak. So the brightest part of the scene is the top of the canyon. That's no more than 1,000 nits, maybe 900, right? And so this is definitely within the capability of all these TVs. And I know we want to push it. So what we'll do is, well, before we push it, I want to hit this monkey real quick. That just sounded terrible. Okay, so this is when I noticed that the TCL was a bit too bright at 100, right? And so this is what happens, so just so you guys can see. I matched it, I think 60, so it kind of makes sense the way TCL set it up. So at its maximum leaf, eco mode, right, is 60. 61, the leaf disappears. 60, the leaf is there. I'm assuming the top of that leaf represents what it should be without them telling us much other than hit 60 and that should be its most accurate brightness. But in movie mode, if you go to 100, it gets quite a bit brighter than the other two TVs. But this is for bright rooms. So where you have on the Sonys maybe brightness preferred, or you might have to go into standard or vivid, you could stay in movie mode on the TCL, preserve your white point and the color you prefer, right? This warmth, and just hit it to 100. This is kind of like, to me, a way of doing active mode on the Samsung maybe, is you take brightness to 100, but that's for your preference, but for our purposes, I'll bring it down to its more accurate 60. But that gives you an idea how much headroom is available on the TCL. Now, it's hard to have the Sony do similar because they don't play that way. I mean, I guess I could put the Sony on standard. So let's take the Bravia, let's put them both real quick so you guys can see. We put the Sonys on something a little bit brighter. Let's say, oops, let's try that again. Vivid's terrible. Okay, standard, there we go. Now the question is, can they match the brightness of the QM8 in 100? So now the QM8 looks like it's still a little bit brighter here. And so if you really do want a super bright TV, this QM8 just kills it in brightness. Definitely a bright TV, my friends. But just for laughs, let's see if vivid mode on this B7 can hit it. And it's still, I mean, it's closer, but now the colors are a bit off and you really have to play with that. So I like that you can get the TCL to hit, make sure they're both in the same one. Okay. Here we go. Yeah, the remote's kind of crazy on this. I apologize. There we go. Okay. And then take the TCL back down, because my purpose is to see at their best, because here's the problem. If you get it too bright on the TCL, you're also going to screw up shadow detail, and then you're going to blame me. Oh, you set the TCL to fail on shadow detail and so forth. So my goal is to get it to look as accurate as possible in case you have the option of going into accurate mode, right? All right, let's move on. Okay, this is going to be a kind of tone mapping in the clouds. Clouds are normally kind of difficult to tone map if it gets super bright. I want to see how bright these clouds are. And this is about 1,500 nits in the clouds. Not quite bright enough. Let's really challenge these TVs. Oh, and of course, what content am I using? I'm using Jennifer Gallo's content. Thank you, Jennifer, for making this content so awesome. So let's try. It would be, here we go, 4,000, 10,000 nits demo. Okay, this is big boys. Now remember, there's still a lot of headroom left in TCL, so let's see which one gets closest to the reference monitor. The reference monitor is capable of hitting the peak spectral highlights of a 5,000 nits, but as long as it's within that 10% window we're talking about, although full screen, it'll hit 1,000 nits. So there's a lot of headroom on the reference monitor to see if these can hit it. And oh wow, so right off the bat we're hitting the brightness challenge right here. And definitely it feels like the QM8 maybe is a little bit too bright, but it's bright and it works. And this is 4,000 nits, and I have to say, it feels, relatively speaking, that it might even be brighter than the reference monitor, but it's all there. So this is very interesting, because if you guys notice, the Bravia 7 and the 9 are identical. So for those of you wondering, hey, how much better is the 7 than the 9? Well, let's talk about the brightness levels first. They match the reference monitor nearly exactly in terms of color, saturation, and everything. The reason why the QM8 looks like it's a little bit desaturated is it's a touch too bright, and so that luminance is actually desaturating some of that color. You're losing a little bit of that color detail. So let me make sure. Now, of course, you guys are saying, oh, wait, before we do any more settings changes, I want to show you guys what the blooming looks like, because now it's super bright. So what does that mean? It means there's a risk of blooming, right? So let's see how badly they bloom. And who is the blooming winner here? Clearly, it's the reference monitor, but it's also the Bravia 9. And so this is what you're paying for. The Bravia 9's blooming control is hilariously good. The QM8, obviously, it's a little bit brighter, and the Bravia 7 matches the Bravia 9's brightness, but look at that blooming control. And now, I'm exaggerating the exposure. I honestly don't see that much blooming, because that level of brightness makes my eyes think it's blooming, when the reality is there's not a lot of blooming there, because there is almost no blooming on the reference monitor. And that Bravia 9 comes so close to that reference. I mean, we're near OLED here. And this is why people pay the big dollars. But perceptually, this is what you guys are going to be seeing. If I take down the exposure to something that I believe is closer to what you guys are going to see. Okay, so I'm slightly overexposing, and you don't see any blooming at all. And that's what I'm talking about, is the B7 very close to B9, and the QM8 too. Now the QM8, again, is a touch brighter than necessary. As you can see, the Sony 3110 preserves some color, even though slightly overexposed, just like the B7 and B9. But the QM8, you're losing a lot of that color. And so if they can just play with that EOTF curve on the QM8, I think we have something special. All the tools are there for the QM8. And unfortunately, they got kind of excited with all of that power. And with all that power, there's very little responsibility here. But the QM8 looks phenomenal for a TV that costs probably 70% of what the B7 costs. So we'll continue with this. And this is 4,000 nits, so the brightest part of this scene is 4,000 nits. But I'm very impressed by the Bravia 7. I really am. I mean, this is definitely, oh, you know what? I want to show you guys something also while we're, oh, this is 10,000 nits, by the way. So we're at 10,000 nits, the brightest part of the scene, and the tone mapping is phenomenal on the 7 and the 9. Whereas in the QM8, it cannot tone map the color down. It's giving you the brightness, but it's giving up the color. So it's up to your choice, guys. Do you want to preserve that orange? Because as you can see on the 3110, there is color there, right? And on the 3110, it will hard clip if it's too bright. So that color is within its ability to show. Whereas on the QM8, it's just, whatever. We've given up. They won't even tone map 10,000 nits. They're just going to clip it and all the color is gone. So on the 7 and the 9, look at how closely they look. I mean, if I saw this scene, I would not be able to tell the difference right now. Only if I hyperexpose it can I study the blooming. And I can say, oh, I could see, all right, I see that there's slightly better blooming control on the 9. And this is 10,000 nit content. Oh, wow. Even there, it's hard to tell that the 9 has slightly better. Okay, maybe here you can see it. It's slightly better. Yep. Okay, so you can see the 9, slightly better bloom control. And of course, the 3110, it's a dual cell LCD. So perfect blooming control. But that 7 is very close, my friends. And I had to hyperexpose it to demonstrate that. And of course, the QM8 is great, but its color saturation at the correct, what you're going to see is it could be better. Definitely could be better. And I think, see, lowering the exposure to what I see, that's what you're going to get. So it's just something to think about, but only if you're hitting 10,000 nits. We're going to use normal content. In normal content, you're not going to see this drastic difference because this is 10,000 nits, but only when we push the TVs do we see the differences. So you guys know what you're paying for, right? It's kind of like people buy a Ferrari, but who drives 200 miles an hour? But knowing that it's there, that's why people buy it. And so you're seeing that here. But I just want to stop right here, show you guys the color saturation. Looks so good on all 4 of these TVs because the reference monitor shows you how saturated his paws are, I guess, those little fingers, the salamander hands. I mean, look at that. In this case, the QM8 it's not as bright, so you're able to see more of that color. Right here, let me turn, there you go. So the color is really all there. But again, it's slightly brighter. And this is why if I increase the brightness any further, I'm going to lose a little bit more color on the QM8. So this is pretty good, I think. All right, moving on. But yeah, Jennifer, you're phenomenal. I mean, this content makes it so easy to separate the performance between these TVs. Okay, so right after this, we're going to see some color saturation in terms of bright, bright blue. OLEDs normally fall apart here, but let's see. Oh, I just love this scene right here. All right, perfect. And very close, all of them. Oh, look at that, right? Those of you considering the Bravia 9 can't afford it, but you're thinking, if I were the Bravia 7, am I losing anything? You're not losing a lot. And if I hyper expose it for you guys, just to see if there's any major blooming you're going to notice. If you're sensitive to blooming, the answer is no. Look at that. Right? The Bravia 9 and the QM8 actually are phenomenal. Oh, so since we're here, this is why you need to set the QM8 to that local contrast to high. I'll show you. If I take that local contrast, here, let me turn this up so you guys can see my setting. If I take local contrast on high, right? Take it down to off. This is why I cannot do that. It just looks terrible. There we go. And I think you can see the difference there. There we go. Is that? Yeah. So you see the difference, right? And if I go back to the local contrast, you'll see the sudden change. This is why you need the QM8 to be at, what's that? Oh, here we go. Local contrast, high. And it makes it slightly brighter. But look at that. Cleans it up completely. So this is the best setting for the TCL for sure. Right. And again, neither the Bravia 7 nor the QM8 is calibrated, but the 9 and the 3110 is. So if there are minor brightness differences between the B9 and the B7, it could be possible that the B7 would similarly drop in its brightness once you calibrate it. It's very close. This is a great one right here. And I'm going to pause on this next. There we go. So this is the brightest grade, 4,000 nits. Uh-oh, did my remote just die? Terrible. I'm going to, oh, there we go. It's like delayed reaction. Okay. All right. So let's, there we go. Okay. And the reason I'm lowering the exposure is the Bravia 7 and the Bravia 9, that blue umbrella, it feels deeper and it matches the reference monitor better. On the QM8, it's a little bit less saturated. And now, if they weren't side by side, I'd be hard pressed to tell the difference, but I can. So it's visible to my eye. I just wanted to make sure you guys saw the difference. And only by kind of lowering the exposure slightly can you notice that. But I can increase exposure actually a little bit more so you guys get more of that realistic brightness. There we go. I think that'll work. Okay, so, you know, it's always about that last, I always tell people, when you're paying, whether it's a Samsung, the LG, or the Sony, that last percentage of performance, that's where that $500 is. And the Bravia 7 and the QM8 are not calibrated, and they look so good, right? And this is why I love being a TV buyer today. In the past, I gotta get it calibrated. Another $450, $500. But this is not bad. I'm loving it. But now you see how close the B7 is to the B9. We're gonna stop and take a look at this. I thought the B9 was head and shoulders better than the Bravia 7 5 months ago. Today, I'm not so sure. Well, I am very sure. It's not head and shoulders. It's probably a couple of hairs better, and that's it. And to me, that is just crazy. We're going to check off angle, and that's where I think Bravia 9 will pay for itself, if we can describe it as that. But the Bravia 9 should have better off angle than the other two TVs. But if off angle is not your thing, there's no reason, honestly, to get the Bravia 9. I mean, if all you're doing is streaming, I'm going to look for some challenging shadow content real quick. I think this will do it. Oh yeah, this is great. Let me stop right here. Okay. So here we have super bright extremes, right? Very bright. And at the brightest part of this scene, we're at 4,000 nits. So right here is 4,000 nits. Now that exceeds the capability of any of these TVs, but not the reference monitor. So what you're going to see is, first of all, they tone map the 4,000 nits great. I see some of that detail in there in the web, and my camera cannot even reach that low. Let me go even further. Okay, I think. All right, so at the top end, these TVs are indistinguishable. And that's where the QM8 shines, by the way, is that top end. Now you go to the bottom end, which is the shadow detail. Let's see how close they are. And, oh, very nice. As a matter of fact, oh man, I hate to say it, maybe the Bravia 7, arguably, slightly better shadow detail than the Bravia 9. I don't know. Am I supposed to say that? Because, okay, so shadow detail, the bark, you guys tell me, which one matches the Sony 3110 best? The Bravia 7 or the Bravia 9? I mean, the QM8's right there, but if you're debating between two Sonys, and this is where you're down to, you're not losing anything with less dimming zones. So it goes to the discussion of software. First, what did the software do to the Bravia 7? It's caught up to the Bravia 9. And then the question is, wait, Bravia 9, how come you have more dimming zones? And why are you losing the shadow detail to the Bravia 7? That's crazy, right? So like, ah. And I'm as surprised as you, by the way. This is the first time I saw this footage with this hyper exposure, because looking at it, they look very similar. But now that I take a double look at the shadow detail, right here, and I'll point it out. Right here, that little lit part of the bark, yeah, slightly dimmer on the Bravia 9. Actually, the QM8 and the Bravia 7 look closer. I think there's a firmware update that needs to be had. Oh, Sony, what did you do? You did so well with the Bravia 7, and now suddenly the Bravia 9 is like, wait, what? What's happening here? All right. This is the highlight of this comparison for me right now. Honestly, I'm as surprised as you. I did not expect the Bravia 7 to do so well in shadow detail. So that was a very pleasant surprise. All right, let's see what you guys have to say. Hey, thank you for coming by, Apple Jelly. And I had to put this up because guess what? I too had my morning workout, except I did my Friday Tabata class, the opposite of yoga, but it feels good. I'm ready to go, ready to go. And we have a super chat. There we go. Thank you so much, Dwight. FOMO, why does it seem like so many TV shows and movies have scenes that are so dark? Even in vivid mode, it's hard to see what's going on. This is a commentary on, unfortunately, you have to see how they're graded. So, sorry, I'm going to take a step back. So if you're in a studio, you're in a grading studio, right? Perfect conditions. You're in a dark room. You have ambient lighting behind the TV. The TV, your grading monitor is literally, what, 2 feet, 3 feet in front of you. You can see every detail. You have this grading monitor, right? You have a $30,000 grading monitor, and you have perfect lighting condition. There's no ambient light noise. And so you're thinking, oh, this is amazing shadow detail. I can see everything. And then you take that same scene and you put it into a crappy TV that 80% of the people have, right? 80% of the people today still have a TV that doesn't do HDR well. And so when they get the scene, they're like, oh, I can't see a thing. Well, that's because it's graded on a 30,000 monitor in a completely dark room. So if you take that same scene on your TV, you turn off all the lights, right? You adjust your gamma properly, you kind of adjust the lighting and everything, get into the right picture mode, then maybe you'll get to see what they see. But most people are in a bright room, and that's impossible, right? If you're in a bright room, every dark scene is going to be way too dark. You're going to have to change your picture mode. You're going to have to lift that gamma. So you have to go into your gamma setting, if it's SDR, and go from 2.6. Oh, you know what? Here's a great place to pause, and I'll show you exactly what needs to be done, because I just saw a scene. That's a perfect example of that. Let's go right here. Yeah, this one. Okay, so let's look at this scene right here, actually. And I'm going to adjust it. So here we are. This is the kind of scene that people are complaining about. Oh, it's too dark, blah, blah, blah. So what you have to do is, now as a TV owner, obviously you probably don't know this, but you're supposed to change the gamma because you're in a bright room, right? And so on the TCL, you go to advanced settings, brightness, go down. Now look at my gamma. It's at 2.6. 2.6 is pitch dark, right? So in a grading studio, it's 2.4. Well, you got to take it down, 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 1.8. Okay, suddenly, look at that. Okay, now I'm in a bright room, gamma 1.8. And so people are not told that in a bright room, you got to take your gamma down to 1.8, which means the scene is brighter. Now you see all the detail. But look at the reference monitor. That is because he was in a dark room. And you're asking, wait, does he see all that detail? Actually, he does, because if I hyperexpose the scene, you see it's all there. It's all there on the reference monitor, but only in a dark room do you see all of that. In a bright room, it looks, again, way too dark. It looks like this, right? But then you have to change your TV's gamma. So hopefully that helps answer your question, Dwight. If you're watching TV short of a man cave and adjusted correctly, everything's going to look way too dark, and you have to adjust your gamma on the TCL like I did. So I'll bring the gamma back before people complain, oh, FOMO, you got the wrong gamma. So my gamma setting is for reference so that I can compare the TVs, and I am in a dark room. So here we go. So 1.8, that's the bright room gamma. And everything in between, right? But I just normally go 1.8 or just 2.6. And there you go. Okay, so now it matches. And this is the detail that you would normally see in a dark room, right? Oops, there you go. See? Ta-da! So hopefully that answers your question. And the problem is directors, color graders, when they're doing a dark scene, they often forget that we watch TV in a bright room, and we don't know how to adjust our gamma properly, and nor should we. By the way, most consumers should not be expected to go in there and adjust the gamma. They need to set it so that you can watch it in any condition, but that's just how it is, my friend. Hopefully that answers your question. And sometimes they forget. They honestly screw up. I've spoken to a couple of people in the business, and like, yeah, we screwed up. It's just, hey, sorry, you know what? It is what it is. And often that's also the case. So hopefully that helps answer your question. I love it when they say that, yeah, we screwed up. Okay, hey, thank you for the super chat, Double Ray. Hi, FOMO, are you expecting a deeper discount on the LG 4 83-inch on Black Friday? Yes, but I'll tell you this. The question is whether the B4 is not close enough. That's going to get a more aggressive discount. I do expect the LG G4 to be deeper. And of course, you need MLA on the G4. Now, when you said 4, I'm assuming G4, but the B4 and the C4 will all get discounts. But here's the problem with the G4. It's constantly sold out. Now, you're wondering, wait, who has the money for that, right? So because it's constantly sold out, if it's discounted, it won't be deep. So the deeper discounts will be in the B4 and the C4. The G4 will be discounted, so to speak, but it won't be a deep discount. Oh, kind of overexposed here. There you go, it's a bit better. So, and let me see. And we're going to go through other more exciting footage for you guys, but I thought it was very cool to see. And we're going to see, actually, here we go. Speaking of shadow detail, let's talk about the star field. And I'm going to have to make sure my lighting doesn't affect the star field test. When I overexpose it, you guys are going to see my light. So hopefully that doesn't affect anything. But I'm going to pop, oh, you know what? Let me stop actually right here first, so you guys can see the differences in reflection handling. So this is important. I know Caleb did a great review on the Bravia 7 recently about the reflection handling, but you guys need to see the differences when it comes to the TVs, right? So you have the Bravia 9, is it better than the Bravia 7? Is it better than QM8? What are the differences? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick flashlight test here. And it'll be, wait, I don't want to make it too bright. I think this will do it. Okay. Here's my flashlight. Okay, you guys able to see that? All right, so here we are. This is the Bravia 7. See the difference there? And then the QM8 down here. So the QM8 actually is more similar to the Bravia 9. The 7 feels like it blows up that brightness a bit too much, right? So I can see the complaint, from Caleb, and it's completely legitimate. So if you have a bright room that's super bright, like we're talking about points of light that's super bright, you may notice that reflection. Now, if it's ambient bright, it should be okay. But if it's a point of brightness, that could be an issue. So definitely pay attention to that, because the 9 is a little bit better. Oops, what happened? Let's try that again. All right, here we go. Again, Jennifer, thank you for the starfield test. And I'm gonna overexpose a bit more so you guys can see this. No, there are no stars yet, but once they appear, I will pause it for you guys. And I can see the stars on the reference monitor already, so I'll stop right here. So, let me see if you guys can see it. Oh, wow, look at that reflection. The Bravia 7. So I'm hyper-exposing it, and you see me right there, right? But then, let me open up the curtains so that there's a chance for the Bravia 9. So you can see that too. Let me see if the Bravia 9 has any issues with that. I'm over here. So you see the difference, right? So anyway, let me close the curtains again, so you guys can see the starfield test. Oh, I think that should do it. And okay, so the QM8 had great black levels, right? But look what happens. They overdid the black levels, and so you have no specular highlights. Look at the reference monitor. Look at wow, wait, Bravia 7. Are you telling me the Bravia 7 has better specular highlights than the Bravia 9? Now, let's overexpose even further and see if there's lifted blacks. But right now, the Bravia 7 is beating the Bravia 9 in specular highlights, and definitely beating the QM8, right? So let's hyperexpose even further if I can. And, oh, yes. Sony, did you forget the Bravia 9 is a great TV? And so what's the give and take? Well, you have terrible reflection handling here. I mean, look at the Bravia 9, right? There's practically no reflection on them. But then on the 7, it's like you can see the world. Hey, you can't win everything, right? Let me open the curtains real quick, right? So you see the difference in the reflection handling. I love it. So now I'm hyperexposed, overexposed, right? But when you overexpose it, it makes it more obvious what's what. And the QM8 isn't bad. So, but then look at the specular highlights, right? Reflection handling, thumbs up, but specular highlights, thumbs down. But so let me change the settings so you can see why local contrast is so important for black levels. And you can't have everything. This is why people get OLED TVs. If you bought an OLED TV, like the Bravia 8 or the S95D, my favorite TV this year, or the G4, another great TV. And oh, by the way, the G4 is absolutely amazing for motion resolution gaming. I've been doing some testing. I created a new gaming testing protocol for you guys. And I tell you, so I just have to, real quick segue. So what I did was I took Black Myth Wukong, right, PS5. I ran it through the TVs, and I set it to 4K 30, 4K 60, whatever it is, quality mode, right? I want all the detail. And then I spun the scene, right? So I'm spinning in circles, right? I capture it in 4K 120. Then I study each frame. And consistently on the G4, each frame was clear. Clear, 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 clear. On the Samsung S95D, there were some frames that were clear. There were some frames where the leaves were blurred. I'm like, wait. And so I played all the different settings, right? Blur 10, blur 0, jutter 10, jutter 0, game motion plus off. And ultimately, its best, highest motion fidelity setting that matched the G4 or slightly better is BFI, right? So with motion clarity on the Samsung, finally, it either matched or beat the G4. But in every other setting I've tested so far, this G4 is phenomenal. Now, is G4 sneaking in a little BFI? No, because I'm having a nightmare of black frame insertion in my slow-mo capture because I have these black spots on my S95D. So I know for sure it's black frame insertion working, but the clarity is there. Unfortunately, well, and I'm going to continue playing with this. I'm not done with my protocol yet, but once I'm done, you guys are going to get some amazing motion fidelity testing for gaming, at least on the PS5. And I think this applies to any console and not limited to the PS5, because whatever the TV receives, it's going to try to give you whatever its motion fidelity algorithm is. And the G4 right now, for me, hands down, best motion fidelity. We're not talking color accuracy, we're not talking HEIG, right? All of that, I think you guys know what to do to tune it, but motion fidelity is so hard to get right. So I'm going to focus on that for you guys when the time comes. I'm still working on it, but yeah, had to sneak that out. Okay, so let's move on with this. Oh yeah, I forgot. I was going to show you what happens. So let's get to the advanced settings, and I'll turn off the local contrast so you guys can get your stars back, right? And look, the stars are kind of there, but look at that clouding, right? You can see the stars, but the clouding is terrible. And let me turn up the, here we go. Okay, so even with local off, right? It's spectral highlights definitely compromised on the QM8. Now, they're great at 1% windows, but at below 1%, you're not getting that there because it's working so hard to give you perfect blacks. So let me put this back on high. Dynamic tone mapping, will that help? Detail priority, maybe that'll do something. And nope, still not there. So its weakness is definitely tiny little stars. And the Sony is, well, not just the Sony, the Bravia 7 is killing it. I thought the Bravia 9 was good, but you know what? I'm wrong. Bravia 7, you beat the Bravia 9 fair and square. I love it. I'm here for it. Okay, take this off. And all the tone mapping is off, whereas the Sony is on gradation preferred. It's most accurate tone mapping. So let's keep on moving with this scene here. Let's get it to brighter stars. Okay, this is a good one to stop so that we can see whether there's clouding, right? All right, let me take the reflections off now. I think you guys have enough of that. All right, so I see a little bit of reflection, so ignore me over here. Now, as there are more stars, I have to say that the clouding control is actually pretty good. There we go. I mean, look at that. The Bravia 7 is legitimately better than the Bravia 9, and without giving you clouding. But look at the clouding on the QM8, right? Like, how did this happen? The Bravia 7 has less dimming zones. It has almost as deep blacks. There is no clouding. Yes, its anti-glare is terrible, as you can see. Actually, let me turn this off. I could take some of that. There we go. Okay. Look at that, my friends. Enjoy the Bravia 7 for what it is. This is formerly the X95L with improved software, which was last year's amazing TV. Now it's rebadged as the Bravia 7 with better software, and it actually beats the Bravia 9. And I don't think Sony expected to see this because honestly, when I was at their event, I was not impressed by the Bravia 7 at all. I think if you guys remember, I mentioned that during my wrap-up introducing that launch, but here I am. Now I'm more impressed by the Bravia 7 than the Bravia 9. Like, what is this? So this deserves some time. And I think the folks at Sony are like, wait, you're not supposed to be denigrating the B9. You're supposed to tell everyone how great the Bravia 7 is. Oh yeah, it's great. And it's beaten the pants off the Bravia 9, given the price difference, my friends. So bravo. This Bravia 7 is legitly good. And look at that. Black levels are very similar, right? You're not compromising anything other than anti-glare on the Bravia 7. This is a great one. Look at that. right? We know the QM8 is great for black levels. Bravia 7, slightly better, less dimming zones. So TCL, what can you do with all those dimming zones? That's even more than the Bravia 9 if you stole a few software engineers from Sony, right? And the 3110, of course, has the perfect blacks. And I am overexposing, so I'm not trying to hide any. Let me see if I can get it any lower. Yeah, I mean, I'm at my highest ISO possible while reducing noise. Let me lower my frame rate even further. But this is just, oh, this is just so good. I could just pause this and say the Bravia 7 just on this is so difficult because the QM8 with so many dimming zones is not a match for either the Bravia 7 or the Bravia 9 in both black level and specular highlight brightness. Amazing. Simply amazing. All right. That's enough gushing. I expected to compare the Bravia 7 to the Bravia 9 as the poor man's Bravia 9. Well, that narrative goes out the window. The Bravia 9 is a rich man's Bravia 7. How about that? Who expected that? So let's go on to another wonderful Jennifer content. Ah, yes, this one's great. Color saturation. I'll pause right here. Okay, not super bright, lots of deep color, and all the TVs do very well. I think, yeah, look at that. Amazing. I'm loving it. And yes, I noticed it too. The Bravia 7 has slightly better color saturation than the Bravia 9, but it could be that maybe it's calibrated, so it feels like it. So maybe if I calibrated the Bravia 7, it would have different color saturation, but I think it's a color saturation thing, not a calibration thing. So let me see. Yeah, the Bravia 7 looks more similar to the reference monitor to me than the Bravia 9. And the QM8 is very bright. I'm trying to adjust for that brightness so that maybe that's better. Okay, here we go. So I think, all right, you guys told me. Which one is the Bravia 9 and which one's the Bravia 7, right? Isn't that great? Guys, I am pleasantly surprised. Other than, I have to repeat the anti-glare. I think it's like, oh, you can't have everything. And this is a great place to go, you know, when I'm gonna get one with a lot of color and go off angle for you guys, right? Because I think that's kind of where things fall apart for some of these TVs is the off angle. Let me find a good scene for off angle. Maybe this one's a good one. Nice saturated colors. Here we go. Let's stop right here. Let me walk to the side real quick. I'll have to find a space to do it. That still doesn't cut it. I'll find a scene that demonstrates off angle. Oh, maybe the red. This one looks good. Let's see more color. I need Jennifer to create me an off angle scene where they have all the colors that are in. Oh, maybe this one. Oh yeah, this is a good one. All right, I think this is where the Bravia 9 can show off. All right, excellent, excellent. Okay, so this is actually a very good scene for off angle. All right, so here we are, right? TVs look great. As a matter of fact, the Bravia 9 looks a bit better than the Bravia 7 here. The Bravia 7 had, because it's a bright scene, I'll tell you how bright it is. The red shirt is at 600 nits, so it's not that bright. So the brightest part of the shirt is at just over 600 nits. And Bravia 7, very weak compared to the 9, and even the 9 compared to the QM8, right? So here, the QM8 is like, ha, you thought I was done, right? The QM8, so scene to scene, these TVs are swapping blows. And right now, the Bravia 7, this is what I expected of Bravia 7, honestly, right? Is right here. Like, oh, you know what? It's not going to be close to Bravia 9. It's going to be outclassed by the QM8. This is so far the only scene that I've seen that's done that. So just so you guys know, it's not all perfect. Whereas Bravia 9 is pretty consistent across the board. But let's go off angle and see how they look. Real quick here. I think it's great. Okay. So off angle, you lose some color on all the TVs somewhat, except for the monitor. And the blooming appears to be slightly worse on the Bravia 7. Bravia 9 still looks acceptable. Right? And then we'll look for other scenes too. But I just wanted to try that experiment real quick. Okay. Still back in focus. All right. There we go. I think that should do it. Okay, so let's move on. Is my internet speed up to 1 gigabit? So I do have optical 1 gig broadband on AT&T. However, whether that happens every time is a question, for sure. Oh, 3,000 nits is great. So I have AT&T's gigabit package. Here we go. Okay, I think all the TVs are in. All right, okay, so all the TVs are back in the screen. And I want to show you this because this is where skin tones and shadow detail on the QM6 is a bit overbrightened, right? As you can see right here. Let's go back one scene. Okay, so in this next scene, the Bravia 7 and the Bravia 9 preserves all the skin detail, all the skin tone. On the QM8, it's just clipping the skin tone. It's not because, well, it is too bright, but also you're losing color. So by going too bright, you've lost color that is in the reference monitor and the 9 and the 8. So the reference monitor is actually very bright, but it preserves all that color despite the brightness. The 9 and the 8 is not as bright as the reference monitor, but it preserves that color, so the skin tones look natural. QM8 is trying to get as bright as the reference monitor, but in order to get that bright, it's giving up the skin tone. And that's the choices that are made when you go bright. You have to decide what is your algorithm going to do. And as you can see, by lowering the exposure, all the skin tones and color on the B7 to B9, matching the reference. Although the reference is the brightest, it has all that color. The QM8, you've lost a lot of color, although you have that brightness. So you have to ask yourself, HDR impact, but overdoing on the impact, or go for all the color. And most people buy a Sony because they want all that color. And this is 3,000 nits, by the way. So that arm, let me just tell you where that 3,000 nit is. Yep, it would be where his sock is over here, and a little bit of the reflection off his skin. But the reality is, it's not realistic to see content that bright. It just shows you that when it's pushed, that's what happens to the TVs. And this is why I told people why the QM7 is such a good deal. The QM7 is great, but it doesn't have to go bright to look great. It's great up to 1500 nits, and that's what most content is like. Now, above 1500, that's where the QM8 can really show off. But if you're not watching that kind of content, get yourself the QM7. Oh, here's another great one. Actually, there we go. This is great for that shadow detail we talked about. Okay, so we know that the reference monitor has perfect blacks. In this case, Jennifer specifically made the blacks slightly lifted. So look at the reference monitor, right? Because I always wonder, wait a minute, is it supposed to be perfect black, or should there be some lifted shadow here? And as you can see, the reference monitor is saying, no, there's black. That's not perfect black. It's actually lifted black. That's intentional. The QM8's crushing it because it doesn't know. It's like, wait a minute, is this supposed to be black or slightly lifted? So the 3110 is saying, no, it's slightly lifted. I can see it right here, right? So I know it's not supposed to be perfect black. And so the B7 and the B9 are closer to that. It's trying to preserve what the 3110 says should be accurate. Whereas the QM8 got confused and overdid its black level, right? It's kind of crushing it down a bit too much, but that's what you're paying the big bucks for, is that accuracy in the shadows. So thank you again, Jennifer, for not giving me perfect blacks in the scene, because it's the only way I can demonstrate that sometimes it's intended for you to see the blacks, right? All right, so let's move on. And this is a difficult one to render. Yeah, if you're asking what it should look like, look at the reference monitor. That tells you exactly how the scene should look in terms of lighting or shadow detail. That's why I got the reference monitor, because I really didn't know. I'm like, wait, who did it right? Here's another one, right? The reference monitor tells you there should be some lifted reflections right above his head, right? And so I think the QM8 and the B9 did a good job here, somewhat matching the 3110. The B7, there's a slight bit of blooming, right? A little halo blooming. The B9 probably does it the best here. And now we're kind of luminance picking, I guess, pixel peeping, luminance picking. But this is what we do. If you're wondering, should I pay the big bucks for the B9? This is why I have to show you. This is where the investment in the Bravia 9 by Sony, this is what they did, is to say, look, no matter how difficult the scene, we can do it closer to 3110 than anyone else. But if this is not the kind of scene you guys watch, which means like super bright scene, and I'll pause, I'll tell you how bright this is. In this scene, the reflection off of his head is 1500 nits. That's very bright. Most movies are graded below 1000 nits, right? So that just gives you an idea of when you hit that kind of scene, the B9 will nail it, and very close to 3110. QM8 comes close, and the B7 is just behind. But it's very scene specific. You saw some scenes where the B7 beat the B9, which I think is awesome too. All right. I think, oops, let me see, there's something, oh yeah. This one, the fencers, I really like this one. So this is 1000 nits. This is typically what you guys are going to see in terms of Netflix content, all of that. So the 3110 tells you there is background information. It shouldn't be crushed out. And it's perfectly rendered on 3110. Everything is uniform, right? There's no haloing or anything. 1000 nits is what their uniform is at, and the background is a bit darker. So I'm hyperexposing, but I think the correct exposure takes you to something like this. Let me see here. So this is closer to the correct exposure, and this is what you're going to see. The question is, oh wait, is the QM8 a little bit too dark, or is the B7 a bit too bright in that background? And so I'll hyperexpose so you guys can make that examination yourself. And it feels like the B9 probably has it the closest. QM8 is right behind, but that extra halo on the B7 is like, that's where the dimming zones are needed, right? But look at the Bravia 9. Look how even it is. And this is what I'm talking about. So if you guys notice, this is too dark in the QM8, and there's a glow here. Here the glow is quite big on the Bravia 7. On the 9, it's very even behind the sensors, very similar to the reference monitor. And I think it's a combination of, well, it is definitely software and dimming zone. With enough dimming zones, the Bravia 9 is able to get there. And at 1,000 nits, it's very fair because I'm not challenging this scene at all. 1,000 nits is exactly the limits of what you see on Netflix, any movie, on any disc, right? 1,000 nits is the most common peak specular highlights, and the Bravia 9 nails it. That evenness behind the sensors is quite good, quite good. And that's, so we're going to get brighter. It's going to go up to 4,000 nits, I think, and you guys will see how much worse it can get. So we're at 2,000 nits now. Let's see what happens at 4,000 nits. I think that's coming up next. Actually, you know what? I'm going to pause right here, though. I want to show you guys something, if you guys don't notice it. So right here, right? I'm sure you guys see this. The QM8 is seeing that, goes, oh, maybe it should be darker, right? But it actually isn't that dark. So these are the little details that goes to fine-tuning the software that unless you have them side by side, you really don't appreciate, right? I mean, there's information there. It's just the QM8 over-darkened that information, whereas the 3110 says, no, it's there, but it's not that dark. Whereas on the B7, you can't even see that information. They're like, ah, whatever, it's just noise. We're just going to cover it up. And on the B9 goes, no, there's something there. And so the B9 ends up doing it closest to the 3110. But I think that's kind of cool that you can see the differences in how everything is being done. So here we're at 4,000 nits. And this one, you see, okay, so suddenly, look at the QM8. Now it's aggressively darkening around. So this is definitely a difference in software approach. At this brightness, the QM8 makes everything around it extra dark to make sure you see it. Whereas the B7 doesn't have enough dimming zones to do that, so there's a glow, that halo is still there, and the Bravia 9 is just consistent with what it does. But you know, there is no wrong answer because I'm overexposing for you to see this. If I take down the exposure to what I think is probably closer to normal, maybe, let's do that and see what happens. Now, I think now I'm underexposing. I'm trying to make sure the luminance matches what I see. And it's hard because my camera doesn't have perfect dynamic range like our vision is. So my camera is also kind of compensating for the dynamic range differences. I think that's still underexposing. Okay. All right, I think that's closer to what we see. So here we have all 4 TVs, and I think this is a great reflection of the number of dimming zones between them. The most dimming zones on the QM8, and so it's able to darken everything around the sensors, which is kind of interesting. The B9 doesn't have as many dimming zones, but it's taking the traditional approach, and it still has a little bit of that glow, but is that glow inaccurate? No, on the 3110, it has that glow as well, and it can get perfectly black if it needed to, but it doesn't. So the B7 actually demonstrates that it needs more dimming zones. So it's kind of cool. I'll expose it even more so you guys can see. On the reference monitor, right, that glow is supposed to be there to some degree. So, whereas the QM8 removed it completely. So this is great. It's great to see. So this is normal content you guys normally see, right? And yeah, we'll do some Netflix later, but I don't think we necessarily should, only because I don't think you guys will be able to tell the difference. They all look great, by the way, you know, Netflix and all that stuff. Okay. So typical scene, I cannot tell the differences between them and the reference. And this is QM8, B7, not calibrated. Green looks great. B9's calibrated. 3110's calibrated. Everything looks great, although the QM8's a little bit brighter. And it's at 2000 nits, the brightest part of that grass. And I'm getting a little bit of clipping on the QM8. So I'm losing some of that color saturation, as you can see. It's a bit too bright, and you're losing color luminance by going too bright. You're desaturating. So even though the QM8 brightness has been taken down to 60, it's still too bright. And this scene kind of demonstrates that. Whereas the B7, B9 goes, no, you guys want all that color there. And I'm looking at, I'll just pause right here. I'm looking at the reference. All the color is there, but it's super bright. So the reference monitor is definitely brighter than the B7, the B9, but it has all that green. And so the Sony is saying, we want to preserve the green. If we get any brighter, we'll be like the QM8, where we get that brightness, but we're going to lose color saturation. We're not going to do that. And so that's what they did here, right? So they might not hit that super brightness. So the question is, which is more accurate? So this is a long scene, right? It's over a course of a few seconds. I don't think you need HDR impact. I don't want to lose color over a scene that's this long. So how long is this scene? It's like, starts now, 2000 nits, right? So we're talking 2 seconds, 3 seconds. At this point, it's too many seconds, right? The HDR impact is lost. Now I just don't have color. And so this is the right decision by Sony, because over the course of many seconds, it's no longer HDR impact, it's what happened to my grass, right? It's the grass looks like it's a bit weeded, yellow, burned out on the QM8. So that's something that TCL could do better, and maybe tone map it, have a more gentle roll off, because that's a really hard clip right there. Oh, this is another one. That's good. Okay, so in this one, actually, the reference monitor is great. It should be this bright. And you should be clipping some of that, but the reference monitor cannot hit that level of brightness, I think. I think it's hard clipping on the reference monitor even. So we're at about 2000 nits. Maybe, yeah, what, 2000, probably close to 3000. And so this is a difficult scene. I think on this one, it's hard to say who has it right, because it may even be causing clipping on my reference monitor, because it's gone beyond the ability of my reference monitor, because the window might be too large for it at that level of brightness, right? So both the reference monitor and the QM8 is doing the same thing. Somebody's like, no, we're going to roll it off and give you more detail, right? And so they're giving you more of that brightness. So I don't know. At this point, I don't know who's right, because it's Jennifer once again broke my reference monitor here. I think she went beyond what the reference monitor is capable of. It happens. That's why I love Jennifer. She even pushes my reference monitor. All right, let's try something new here. Oh, I think make sure I cover some of your super chats. Hey, all right. Hey, Sean, thank you for coming by. Hi, FOMO, hope you are fine. I am. The Q900D Samsung is being taken back in a week, but why Bravia 9 is making it difficult for me to buy after watching comparison scenes where the 7 seemed better. Can you put One Piece scene? Are you talking about the TV show One Piece? So the Bravia 9 is more consistent, Sean. The Bravia 7 looks better here and there, as you guys saw, but the 9 is consistent. It's predictably good. There is no scene where it says, oh, it didn't do well. Whereas the 7, in some scenes, wow, it does great. In some scenes, ooh, it could have done better. I never got that from the Bravia 9, where I said, ooh, it could have done better. It's just like, oh, wow, the 7 did slightly better in this scene. So the 9 is consistently good across the board. The 7 and the QM8, like in some scenes you saw the QM8 struggled, in some scenes the B7 definitely struggled, and in some scenes the QM8 did really well, as well as the 7. The 9, above average to excellent in every scene. There was no scene where I said, oh, that 9 needs help. And I think that's where we are with the Bravia 9, Sean. It's that consistency across the board. So it's obvious the software was optimized for the Bravia 9. The B7 is sharing that software. So in some scenes it looks great. In some scenes it doesn't have the dimming zones. It just doesn't. I mean, it looks good most of the time. And only when I challenge it with like bright scenes, with some of that weird shadow detail that you guys saw. The 7 struggled, and same with the QM8, right? So I think it's safe to say that with the Bravia 9, you're getting consistency of above average to excellent always. The B7, you got some excellence, then you got some fumbles. Same with the QM8, right? Excellence and then some fumbles, but at least you know where the fumbles are. The QM8 does not do well. Surprisingly, the black level is so aggressive that it's actually dimming some of the specular highlights in the starfield test as you saw, and the B9 doesn't. The B7 doesn't sometimes, but when the shadow detail is so large and there's a bright scene, then it suffers from a slight halo effect. So hopefully that helps your decision. I know you're looking for a replacement of the Q900D. I would recommend the Bravia 9 over the 7 if you want like consistent excellence. The Bravia 7 is great for most people because most people are not watching what we're doing here, which is, oh, 2000 nit content, 3000 nit in a super dark scene. Oh, you're pushing these TVs to breaking point, right? Like this scene is great. They all look the same, right? Let me hyperexpose it real quick so you guys can see that the shadow details are very similar. Let's see. Yeah. So hyperexposed, black levels, indistinguishable. And then go the other way. Oh, how bright do they go? Well, let's see. And their brightnesses are the same. No one TV is really brighter than the other. And this is a scene where the maximum brightness is about 650 nits. So this is a typical scene on a typical everyday TV show. No more than 600 nits. This is how your HDR is, right? Let me see if there's something. Okay, oh, this is kind of like a skiing scene, bright white. So let's see here. So the QM8 definitely feels like the brightest one in this scene. Definitely does. But not by much. Let me see. How bright is this whole scene? It's about 1000 nits. So it's 1000 nits full screen. And they all come very close to the reference monitor. So not bad. Not bad at all. And hockey, all 3 TVs are highly recommended in terms of keeping that brightness going with a white scene and not worrying about burn in or anything like that. Right. Okay. Oh, Sean. When will we be able to see the sports comparison? Bravia 7, Bravia 9, G4 S90D, because the Q900D FOMO you returned, whose motion handling was exceptional. So yes, that is going to be happening soon. I will have that comparison. Now that I have the Bravia 7, the 9, and the G4 and the S90D. But this goes to another question you had before, since we're in this sports-related scene, hockey. So you mentioned earlier, I think that you saw in a review of Arting's ratings that I think they said that maybe the S90D or the S95D didn't have a great sports score. So I dived deep into how they scored sports. And unfortunately, I have to disagree with ratings approach. And you guys can tell me if you agree or disagree with that approach. But basically, if you look at how they break it down, their component pieces are like brightness, reflection handling, and upscaling. But their upscaling is not using sports content. They're not using YouTube TV. They're upscaling a movie SDR and they're extrapolating, oh, you know what, maybe this applies to sports. They're not actually looking at motion handling at all. If you look at the ratings breakdown of sports content, the motion handling part of it is not in its top 3. The top 3 is like brightness and anti-glare and upscaling of low bit rate. But then if you look at upscaling low bit rate, what they're looking at is pixelation, whereas I look at clarity and motion resolution. That's the difference, right? Because for me, when you watch sports, it's all about clarity and motion resolution and the settings to get there. And it's easy to get rid of macro blocking if you focus on smoothing and all those different settings. But the reality is, how do you handle motion clarity and motion fidelity, which is what I'm about when I watch sports. And ratings does not address that specifically. Instead, they extrapolate the sports based on the component pieces that are unrelated to sports, in my opinion, because they're not using sports content in motion. It's almost static content where they're saying, well, although it's static, let's extrapolate what sports would look like. I don't think that works. I think you have to put it a real sport content with their whatever bit rate that comes through. In my case, YouTube TV. I'm using a sports feed on YouTube TV, whether it's hockey, football, whatever, and I'm specifically choosing that resolution and bit rate that most people have access to, and then seeing how the TV then handles that motion. And I focus on that, right? I go frame by frame to see if that motion clarity is different frame by frame, and that's very different. So it depends on what you're looking at, what's important to you in sports. And if you break down the component pieces, if you share what I think is important in sports, then that's the way you can watch my video to see, oh, he says this is great for sports, but you know why. But there's definitely, every reviewer is different when it comes to, hey, this is great for sports or gaming. Like when I start doing gaming TV comparisons, I'm going to focus on what I think is the most difficult, which is motion fidelity. At 4K 30, 4K 60, in the highest quality, what does each frame look like? Does the TV, in order to get to low latency, what do they do to that image? What do they take away so you can get low latency? And if there is higher latency, is it worth the trade-off? So when I'm doing my preliminary right now, comparing the S95D to the G4, I noticed the G4 is about, on average, 10 to 16 milliseconds faster than the S95D. But what is that trade-off, right? Because if you look at the G4 in game mode, they shut off a lot of the processing in order to get there, but it looks phenomenal. I'm like, great choices, right? And ultimately, that's something that you have to understand. Like, oh, the G4 has better latency than the S95D, but what did they give up? Frankly, I don't think they gave up anything. I mean, other than brightness, and that's a G4 thing, it's slight, right? But I'm just so impressed that the G4 had both low latency and image clarity, whereas the S95D, I didn't get that, but I had to study that frame by frame, and not every frame was the same. I had to run it through about a 6-second loop maybe, and through the 6-second loop, study each frame and see on average, what are they doing in each frame? And that's why I don't like gaming reviews, right? It just takes way too much time, but I guess it's worth it for you guys. So yeah, every time you guys ask me, hey, can you compare sports or gaming? Man, you guys don't understand what you ask of us. It's like, hey, it's a great TV for gaming. And so I will start doing that, but I'll tell you right now, I'm going to have fun doing that with QM8. So we're going to do QM8, B7, and B9, right? We'll do it on PS5. I'll also compare their gaming and see how their latency and their image blur or motion blur, how that works, and see what happens. Okay, oh, another super chat. Thank you, Sean. When will we be able to see, oh, I already did that one. There was another super chat. Here you go. Here you go. Okay. Since I had experience with all Samsung 8Ks, yeah, I know you did. If you guys don't know, Sean has literally bought every 85-inch 8K from Samsung for the last 4 or 5 years. And each time he's returned it because of bad DSE. And most think 8Ks are useless. But from personal experience, I can say they are brilliant. So for me now, I feel the Bravia 9 should be the best. I hope sports comparisons clear it. So I think if I remember correctly, I did a 900D sports comparison way back when, and we concluded that its motion was subtly better than whatever I had compared to it at the time. I think I was comparing it to the A95L, maybe S95D. I think the Bravia 9 may or may not be there. I've completely forgotten. It's been so long. But when I did the 900D sports, there was 1 or 2 in the tennis scenes where the ball was clearer frame to frame on the 900D. And that, hey, you know what? That's correct. They did do that. They cleared the ball up on a fast-moving ball. But I had to stop the frames. When they moved, to be fair, they all looked very good. But the 900D is that touch clearer. You could see the tennis ball slightly better frame to frame as it moved. They cleared it up, whereas on the other TVs, I forgot which one they were, there was a slight blurring effect. So depends on what you prefer, but I don't think you would be able to notice the difference unless you stopped it frame by frame, for sure. Okay, so I think I've seen enough to kind of wrap up. Let me see if there's any more. And by the way, so we've been running this for the last few seconds. I don't think any of these TVs are dimming, so I think we're good. I think any of these TVs would be great for, yeah, their brightness has been pretty, and this is in filmmaker mode, by the way, and it's very bright. And we know the QM8 can get even brighter if you need that extra brightness. Good heavens, you can go blind with that. Okay, let me see. Oh, let's see. This is HDR, that's low brightness HDR, what you will see on Netflix, like that. This volcano. Yeah, look, they all look great. Surprise, surprise. Let me turn up the exposure a bit for you guys. There we go. And, you know, great uniformity. I mean, this is it. This is how good these TVs all look. So let's as we go through these scenes. Oh, wait. Did you guys say you wanted to watch? Oh, another super chat. Thank you, Double Ray. You missed my second super chat. Oh, I apologize. Here we are. Thank you. I had to give you a super chat for that. Thank you. Sorry for I was referring to the G4. Is the $1,000 discount now worth the buy? If so, do you suggest waiting for Black Friday? So if you're in the USA and you have access to Best Buy and you're a member, and I think you should become a member, it's not that expensive. It allows you 60 days to make a price adjustment. So get it now, get it at Best Buy, and then if they drop the price, you can ask for the price adjustment, right? And that's awesome. And not only a Best Buy's own price adjustment, if you see a competitor that's a legit authorized seller selling the G4 at the price that is lower than what you bought it for today, over the next 60 days, boom, they will adjust it. I think they're one of the few retailers that will do that. You know, it's in their policies as long as you're a member. I forgot which membership level, but at this price level, it's worth the $100 or whatever. And, you know, they give you additional warranties or whatnot. So with the Best Buy membership, you get that. Now, if you're buying off of other retailers like Amazon, where they give you 30 days, you might still get a price adjustment within the 30 days. So let's say give it another week or two, buy it outside of Best Buy, make sure you call them and say, hey, will you give me a price adjustment over the next 30 days? And if they say yes, and it's written on an email somewhere, boom, buy it now. Then you know, because if the price doesn't go down and it goes up, you locked in your price. And if it goes down, hey, you hedged against changing prices, right? So that's what I recommend everyone do. Yeah, thank you for that. And sorry, I had to give me a super chat to remind me. You guys are awesome. Is the immersion that big of a deal? Oh, what a great question. The answer is yes, it is. So this is a survey they did in France a few years ago, right? They you know, a bunch of random people, and they gave them different improvements to their TV experience, right? They isolated size, they isolated motion resolution. We'll talk about motion, the frame rates. They isolated the pixel density slash 4K 1080p and brightness, right? So this is what people ranked as the most important to their viewing experience as far as, oh, this looks better. Number one consistently was a larger TV. Even if your resolution dropped a little because you're closer to a larger TV, so, you know, 4K TV from 6 feet away and a 4K TV from 4 feet away, same size, doesn't look as sharp, right? They don't care. And additionally, going from 1080p to 4K, bottom of the list. That was not important to them at all. In terms of this ranking, what was most important was getting a bigger TV. Next up is bright enough. As long as it's bright enough, they don't care if it got brighter. So motion resolution was the noticeable difference. So if it's too dim and it got brighter, of course they loved it. But above a certain brightness, you're like, oh, I can't see, it's too bright. I mean, at some point it becomes uncomfortable. And this is when 60 FPS sports made such a huge difference. For sports, people preferred, if they were to choose between 4K at 30 and 1080p, maybe even 720p at 60 frame rates or 120, they chose motion resolution every single time. Everything else, like brightness being equal, right? The 1080p to 4K is not a big deal if you get 60 FPS or 120 motion in sports. And that, so this is why Europe, they are so big on getting that frame rates up, And unfortunately, frame rates is also very bandwidth intensive, right? So we know 8K takes a lot of bandwidth. Well, so does doubling your frame rate or quadrupling it. So going from 30 to 60 for me, I think is very important. But back to your question, immersion is the biggest deal. So if you can go from if you're upgrading, let's say you have a 55-inch TV and you have a budget to go with a top of the line OLED at 65 or step down OLED, but you're going 83-inch, step down OLED, 83-inch, you will enjoy that immersion. It is going to be phenomenal. Going 2 sizes up, assuming you're sitting at the proper distance, and the proper distance is around 50-degree viewing angle. To me, some people prefer 40, but approximately 7 feet from a 75, 77-inch TV, 8 feet from an 85, 80-inch around there. And if you're 9 feet or more, you got to go with a 98-inch and above. I mean, that gives you maximum immersion. But if you're okay with that viewing angle, I think it's phenomenal. And I think that will give your whole family that immersiveness. Because as you're seeing here, I mean, here's a perfect example. The QM8 is $999, right? Whereas the B7 is $1,400, the B9 is $3,000. Well, if I had a $3,000 budget, I'd take the QM8 at 85 inches for $2,400 right now, right? Or pay at $3,000 and get a 100-inch TV, right? I think the QM7, oh my God, the QM7 98-inch is like $3,000. I would take that all day long if I'm 10 feet away. If I'm 10 feet away from an 85-inch or 85-inch whatever TV, or 10 feet away from a 98-inch QM7, that is the TV I would get for $3,000, not a 65-inch B9. Of course, it depends on how close I'm sitting. If I'm sitting 6, 7 feet away, all right. But it's the immersion is forgotten. And I think it's the cheapest upgrade TV to TV this year. It's the golden age of getting 85-inch and above. So if you have the luxury of a large room and you need a large TV, go with a large TV and then upgrade from there. I'll go straight to what you said, Quack Fu. So many jokes we could all make with that line. Where's Lisa when you need her? Okay, and I think this is a great place to kind of end right here. With that, we don't want to dive too deep into the deep end. Let's conclude about the Bravia 7. So the Bravia 7, its biggest weakness is anti-reflection, obviously. So but when does that become an issue, right? Is when you have a bright point of light, like a window where the sun shines into the window. Don't get the Bravia 7, only because you will see that sun through the window behind you on that TV. It was obvious. Now, it also affects other TVs. It's just slightly worse on the Bravia 7 because it blows it out across the screen. But let's take that aside. If you have light control in your room, the Bravia 7 looks like right here, like the Bravia 9 in most content that you're going to watch. Netflix, HDR streaming, old TV shows, new TV shows, any TV show. Now, if you're looking at 2000 nit content and above, where you have challenging scenes that you saw, the Bravia 7 may struggle. May. Doesn't mean it will, it just may struggle, right? Whereas on the Bravia 9, it's very consistent across the board, but you're paying for that premium. It's the luxury. It's the Sony tax where, oh, everything is great across the board. Oh, there's Snoopy. I don't want to get hit for that. Good heavens, no. How to get Snoopy in here? All right, let's go down. Okay, so like here, look at this. Look how amazing the Bravia 7 looks, right? It's slightly dimmer than the Bravia 9, just a touch, but it does everything right. And that's what we're seeing with the Bravia 7. It's a lot closer to the Bravia 9 than I expected. And in specular highlights, shockingly, sometimes it beat the Bravia 9, which is great news for those who have the Bravia 7. The QM8 for $999. I mean, if that's your budget, why are you even looking at the 7 and the 9? I mean, for $999, the question is whether you should get a QM7. That is the harder question. QM8 or QM7? I prefer, for the price of a QM8, I take the QM7 and go one size larger. So the QM8 is $999, right? For a 65-inch. I take the QM7 75-inch for $999 because they're that close. As a matter of fact, I know I've said this many times. I need to do this video. The TCL QM7 is my TV of the Year editor's choice because I take value into consideration when I do my editor's choice. And the QM7 is such an amazing value. It is the QM8 up to 1500 nits. Like up to that point, it is everything the QM8 is. Same black levels, same shadow details, like the settings, everything is great. And in sports content, it's almost as bright. But then you can get one size larger. So if you're thinking of the QM8, I would always consider the QM7, but add that size up for the same price of a size smaller QM8, get that QM7. But if you're looking in the Sony space and you're seeing color accuracy, better color saturation as you're seeing here, better skin tones, start with the Bravia 7. I really feel comfortable, assuming you have light controlled room, and then go Bravia 9 if you need that excellence across the board. I mean, I'm just so impressed by what the Bravia 9 did today in that fencing scene. That is very hard to do. So I'm excited to see what Sony will do one day when it has the same number of dimming zones as the QM8. All right, let's see if you have any final super chats or questions for me. And last questions about the Bravia 7 or anything. Just ask me anything you want, my friends, and then I'll try to hit it. I know I missed a lot of your questions. So FOMO, what is the best LG TV? If you take value into consideration, absolutely the B4. The B4, the B3, for most content, streaming, just watching basic HDR, nothing super bright, nothing challenging, Netflix, I think the Bravia 4 is fine, especially at the 83-inch size when you need Dolby Vision and it's around just above 3,000. I like the B4 a lot. It gives you everything most viewers would need. Now, as a gaming TV, it may not get to that level of brightness as the G4, but I wouldn't pay the premium for the C4 unless you need, 144 hertz and all four ports, 144. I think the B4 is a phenomenal value for what you get. I'd say B4 to G4. I'd skip the C4 because if you're looking at C4 at that point, like, well, why are you considering the S90D? Because you're getting so much more for the same price of the S90D. But the B4, as long as it's a few hundred cheaper than the S90D, it's more compelling to me, especially at the larger sizes, right? 77-inch, 83-inch. So for the price of a 65-inch C4, I think you could swing a 77-inch B4 on discount at some point. But I do like the B4 a lot. I saw it against the A95L and the C4 and the G4, and the B3 held its own in normal content. Just basic SDR. Sports, it doesn't get as bright, obviously, as the G4. And that's the only reason I would not get the B4 is I watch a lot of sports in a normally lit room. Not bright enough, but if you're in a light-controlled room, the B4 is great. If you're in a bright room, you have to go with the G4. The C4 doesn't come close, right? So to me, the C4 is kind of like a dead man's land, so to speak. If you need a bright TV, C4 doesn't even come close to AMOLED. I mean, get the G3 before you get the C4. But G4 is the TV for all occasions. So that's literally the best TV from LG, but it does everything really well. I'm very impressed by it, for sure. Hey, thanks for the super chat, Ethan. Will you ever host a meetup event in SoCal? My meetup events are at actually M-Wave, so it's not in SoCal. It's, meetup events so hard to organize. So I normally try to do it as part of a event. So like CES in Las Vegas, if you go to that, or M-Wave, which is open to the public in Kansas City, but it's an event where you can meet me, Brian, we're all there, and you can get some of the stuff cheap because a lot of these are showcase TVs that we want to get rid of, and some people are able to buy it and take it home. So M-Wave right now is my only meetup event, so to speak, and or Val Electronics Shootout. I think Robert has a limited number of tickets he gives to people or sells to people annually, so we can meet up during the shootout in early August, late July, something like that. But yeah, thanks for the support. All right, let's see any other questions. Oh, I see you, Sean. No, Bravia 9 was not there in the comparison of sports. Yes, thank you for the reminder. Hope to buy a Bravia 9 now. Would you, FOMO? Yes, I would. I have checked the Bravia 9 sports. As a matter of fact, I spent the weekend watching football, college football, on the 7, the 9, and the 8, and all three TVs did very well for me. Hope to buy the Bravia 9 now. Maybe the DSC will be better on the Sony. I've never had an 85-inch Sony, and I know you only go for the 85-inch size. Generally speaking, 85-inch is very hard to get all that DSC correct, but I'm hoping that Sony bends it better than Samsung. So statistically, you should have a better shot with the Sony 85-inch, and looking forward to a sports stream soon for us. For us, you and Brian's rating matter, not our teams. Well, that's why we have such a variety, right? We have different approaches to everything. But just so you know, when we do sports streaming, it's very hard to see sports motion. So oftentimes, it's easier for me to do the testing ahead of time, capture some of that on slow frame rate, and then put it into my stream, and then try to do the comparison. But it's really hard to do sports streaming. Normally, it would be a discussion and a conclusion rather than this, where we're discovering new things at the same time. So, we'll try. We'll try it again before the end of the year for sure. Thank you, Sean. All right, anything else? If not, we're gonna wrap up in 2 minutes. Is this the QM850G or the QM851G? This is the 2024 QM851G. Sorry for that. But yes, it is the 2024 model. All right, I think. Immersion question, here we go. Follow up. With the immersion question, would you go Hisense 98-inch or 83-inch LG G4? If I'm doing any gaming at all, I have to go with the G4. But then you lose out on the immersion, but immersive gaming where you don't like the game quality is an issue because we talked about motion fidelity. So if there's any gaming involved, obviously the 83-inch G4 is the gamer's TV paradise, period. So Ote, if you have a console, go with the 83-inch G4. Now, the 98-inch UX is around, what, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000, something like that? The immersion is there. The HDR is there. All of that is there. The question is the 98-inch UX that much better than the 98-inch QM7? So Ote, question goes back to you. What is it you watch? If you watch just normal movies, right, whatever comes on Blu-ray disc, 4K UHD, streaming Netflix, I don't know that you need a 98-inch UX, honestly. I think the QM7 is phenomenal. The UX is good, but you're paying for a lot of brightness. So if you need super bright sports in a super bright room, 98-inch UX will be brighter than the QM7. But I do like the QM7 tone mapping slightly better. I have the 75-inch U9, which shares the same processor as the UX, and its tone mapping is not as good as the QM7. It just, that color gradation is not there for me. So I'm hoping that 98 UX addresses that. Now, everything else, it looks great. Sports, news, old TV shows, whatever. But in the most challenging scenes, its brightness is wasted. So if you don't need that brightness, I think the QM7 or even the QM8 at 98-inch may be the way to go. But I go with the QM7 for $3,000, and that difference, put it into your audio system. But if any gaming at all, again, go with the 83-inch G4 and don't look back. That's the best gaming TV you can buy, period. End of story. Oh, well, there you go. Gaming is main for me. 83-inch G4. I mean, the minute you say main, you will be unsatisfied with anything else. So yeah, definitely 83-inch G4, and you're done. For the 5th time, QM7 calibration video, please. Because watch your videos. Now help me calibrate it. Okay. Actually, it's the same settings as the QM8. So let's, right now, if you missed it, before we go, this is my settings for the QM8, and this applies to the QM7. It's not calibrated because calibration, you actually need calibration equipment. So what we're going to do is tell you exactly how to get the best image out of your QM8. And movie mode, so QM8, QM7, movie mode. Brightness, I set it to 60 because the QM8 is way too bright. On the QM7, you could be at 100 and still be pretty close. 90 to 100 on the QM7, that's the only difference. Everything else is default. Color saturation 50 is fine. Advanced settings, go to brightness. Contrast, keep it at 100. Black level 50. Dynamic contrast, don't touch that. Black stretch, don't touch that. Dynamic tone mapping, you may have to touch it on the QM7, but that is to taste depending on what you're watching. On the QM8, I leave it off. But on the QM7, you might play with it, have it on or off. Local contrast, high. That's the best one for both TVs. Everything else, keep it off. Gamma, if you're in a dark room like I am, 2.6. Otherwise, in a brighter room, go to 1.8. You see the difference in brightness. The whole TV lifts in brightness. So if you're in a bright room, 1.8 to 2.0, right? Just play with that. As far as gamma is concerned, if you're in a man cave, 2.6, and you'll be happy. That's it. That's what I love about the TCL. It's so easy. Let me know if that helps. Otherwise, you know, you leave it in the comment below. Oh, FOMO, you broke my TV. All right. Okay, my friends. Hey, you guys are the best. All right, we're going to wrap up. Until next time, stop the FOMO and let me know in the comments below what you think of the Bravia 7. If you were on the fence about the Bravia 7, did I convince you to get it, or did I convince you to get the QM8 instead? Until next time, stop the FOMO.